how far would Sukuna make it in a Dragon Ball Gauntlet? When I did this with Gojo, he was actually more limited if you could believe that. We'll play Sukuna in Dragon Ball right from Chapter 1, and we'll keep going through different arcs until he comes to a hard stop, which is probably later than you think. If he even has a slight chance to win, we'll say that he keeps going. Usually gauntlets aren't like this, but I'm doing it this way to see if there's ever a point where he really can't do anything. The point here is to bring him as far as possible, and given all of his abilities plus his battle IQ, I think he will find some ways to win. Spoilers, by the way. There were also some things I forgot last time, like the fact that telekinesis can get through Gojo's infinity, so thanks for the comments on that. Not that it applies here, but I'm going to be more in depth than last time to make sure I don't miss anything, on both sides. For this, we're going to use current Heian Sukuna, at full power. Since we're using the current manga Sukuna, he doesn't have Mahoraga, but still has the blueprint from Mahoraga, letting him use the world-cutting dismantle. He's in Megumi's body, but has no 10 shadows here. Also, no strongest meat rider in history around me to give him weapons. He's fighting alone, but we'll also give him his cursed tool, Kamutoke. We're gonna ignore Hitten because we don't know what that does yet. And as usual with my JJK Crossverse videos, I like to assume everyone can be affected by domains like normal JJK characters. Inanimate objects can be affected by a malevolent shrine anyways, but this way we can let it function to its fullest. It would also be in character for Sukuna to hold back and try to enjoy the fights, but for this video we're gonna assume that he's bloodlusted, looking for a quick and surefire win. This also isn't a consecutive gauntlet either. In each arc, he starts fresh. And one last stipulation, we're going to be using Dragon Ball's manga. No anime continuity or filler stuff from Dragon Ball. So now with all the guidelines set up, let's start covering Sukuna. What is he actually capable of? We're essentially using a fully healed Heian Sukuna based on his appearance from chapter 238. As a trade-off for giving him the world dismantle, we'll give him the same binding vows too. As for his other attacks, we'll assume he has no limitations besides the ones he normally has. In his fight against Gojo, he did have to seal Divine Flame away due to chaining his domain a bunch, so that won't apply here. All of this is because, as of recording, this arc hasn't concluded. There are still variables and unexplained things that I can't account for here. So here's a rundown of the build for Sukuna we're using. Megumi's body, but incarnated into Heian Sukuna. He is at full power here. He could use his Divine Flame normally, which we'll cover more in depth later. His domain will function as it normally does. But he won't have 10 shadows since we have yet to see him use it again, and these are solo fights anyways. As for World Dismantle, it requires chance, hand signs, and aiming. This is important to note because this dictates how all of his attacks will work. The reason we're doing this is to avoid these variables I mentioned, while giving him a hypothetical build that's balanced and not outlandish. We could just give him no restrictions in Mahoraga, but this build feels fair to compensate for the lack of info on some things, as well as the extra things that he should have. Plus, if he had the 10 shadows, he could just spam Mahoraga as much as he wants. First, attack power and durability. I feel like JJK characters are often downplayed a bit, not by a ton, but still. I think Sukuna at minimum is a city level fighter. That's the bar. But I like to push him higher. He scales above Jogo, who leveled part of Shibuya, and his fight with Mahoraga left the city in ruins. Plus, his Divine Flame actually incinerated Mahoraga and a chunk of the city. This is when he was at 15 fingers, by the way, and not even going all out. In the current part of the story where he is now, he's way stronger. Another great example of his strength, while holding back and not even fully incarnated, in Megumi's body still, he tanked a 200% Hollow Purple, and of course was able to beat Gojo, once again all while holding back, said by Gojo himself. In chapter 258, we see Heian Sukuna open his domain again, but it's incomplete, and Sukuna is heavily damaged and fatigued. It's to the point where his heart isn't even beating regularly, it's pumped by his curse energy. Yet his partial domain, even with all these weaknesses, it's still enough to do this to the city around him. Keep in mind, inanimate objects are only hit by dismantle, not cleave, which can be adjusted, and not the world dismantle that Sukuna has either. So this is just the power of his regular dismantles. So take all of those factors I just listed, and we can see this is the absolute lowest destructive capacity of his domain. At full power with nothing held back, he'd be way beyond this at this point. I'm going to place him at large city level. I feel it's pretty reasonable, not too low, not too high. You could probably rank him even higher. And of course his world dismantle negates durability, so giving that a rating doesn't matter much. But as for his regular attacks, as well as his domain, I think placing him at the level of a large city is really good. Personally, I'd go even beyond this, but let's be conservative here. This part actually doesn't really matter in the long run, you'll see what I mean. Next on to speed. Sukuna is, at bare minimum, massively hypersonic in combat and reaction speed. He kept up with the full power mythical beast Amber Kashimo, who controls real lightning. It's not something that acts like lightning, it is actual lightning. His curse technique lets him control electrical phenomena, and everything about him indicates that it is real lightning he's using. So being able to keep up with that and dodge that, just from base Kashimo, that would make you massively hypersonic. But no, he was doing that when Kashimo was at full power. So let's go even further. I think Sukuna's faster than light. Why? When fighting Kashimo, he dodged an EM wave point blank. These move at light speed, so his reactions and his dodging here would have to exceed light speed. And he did this while he was still in Megumi's body, and again, weakened from Gojo. This is not his Heian incarnation, nor is he at full power here in general, or full health. So hypothetically, a full power Heian Sukuna in this gauntlet should be faster than light. I don't know if people consider this a highball or not, but this is what I'll use. And yeah, I get the implications of saying that and how it affects scaling later on. I plan on making a video about JJK speed separately, so if you're interested in that, or similar videos to this one, hit subscribe. Now onto his abilities. This is the real meat of this gauntlet. First, let's briefly cover Shrine, Sukuna's curse technique. One move he has is Cleave. It can be adjusted based on durability. Some people misinterpret this as negating durability, but no, that's not the case here. Its output can be adjusted by Sukuna, but it's never stated or shown to be infinitely adjustable. Yuta using Cleave also supports this. If it really negated durability, then Yuta could have just adjusted it as far as he wanted to, and it would have cut right through Sukuna's head, but it didn't. This attack is done through contact. But there likely is a cap to how much Sukuna can adjust this. He also has Dismantle, which lets him attack from a range. Thanks to Mahoraga, he could use this to cut the world itself. The world-cutting Dismantle can actually bypass durability, since it literally just tears open space itself. He also has Divine Flame, letting him use a ranged flame attack. This is seemingly one of his most powerful moves, and a trump card. Divine Flame has a few conditions. Against Gojo, he couldn't use it because of all the changes made to his domain, which caused it to be ineffective, but here that's irrelevant. There is a binding vow that makes it so he can't use it outside of his domains unless it's a 1v1, although it doesn't really matter much here because these fights are just going to be 1v1s anyways. When he uses this attack in his domain, the domain chops up everything into dust and that creates a dust explosion. This is what happened against Mahoraga. The vow only letting him use it during a 1v1 wasn't made during the Gojo fight, it seems to have been there beforehand. The technique is slow by default, so this compensates for that. Which is why I said before, no new vows. This was a vow that was already in place. He's required to use Cleave and Dismantle before opening the flames as well, and when he uses it in his domain to create an explosion, this obviously adds a bunch more damage and intense changes in pressure. So it's incredibly hot, creates dangerous pressure, and has explosive power too. Sukuna also has incredible stamina alongside his brilliant reverse curse technique, allowing him to have great regeneration. His regen is considered the best in verse, besides Jackpot Akari, and it's comparable to Gojo. And beyond regeneration, he could actually survive without organs. He was perfectly fine without a beating heart in the beginning of the series, and if his organs do fail, he could operate them with cursed energy. He's currently doing that with his heart. Kamutoka is a powerful cursed tool that lets him use electricity. Another important ability that people tend to forget is the fact that he can possess other people. Most people can't handle it and will just die, but in chapter 55, Kenjaku states that Sukuna can actually choose his vessel. His finger is considered a lethal poison, but hypothetically, anyone who doesn't die from it can be Sukuna's vessel, if he chooses it and they're not able to contain it. Yuji's body was specifically made to be a vessel, and Megumi also did say that there's a small chance someone can survive Sukuna's finger. And when Sukuna took over Megumi's body, Sukuna said it's a gamble. Whether or not his finger is a literal toxin, or if it's just poison due to the cursed energy, that's debatable, but it seems to be a literal toxin. This will be important later. If you're enjoying this video so far, drop a like. It really does help with the channel a lot. Now, let's start the gauntlet. For the first arc, Sukuna washes everyone. The biggest issue here is actually Shenron, the one non-combatant who's actually never around, besides when he's summoned. If someone gets the Dragon Balls and wishes to kill or seal Sukuna, his power is enough to do that. Kami scales above Sukuna, and therefore, Shenron's wishes can affect him. It's implied Shenron can actually kill people, as long as they're weaker than the creator of the Dragon Balls, which is Kami at this point. But we're obviously not assuming everyone here has instant access to Shenron, just worth noting. No one in this first arc can harm Sukuna, besides Max Power Roshi. Even if you want to downplay it since we're earlier on, he can destroy mountains. So the Max Power Kamehameha should be enough to kill him. His Kamehameha reaches the moon in a few seconds. Again, we are using the manga here, but for this we kind of need to use the anime, and it takes about 13 seconds to reach the moon, so it's only a fraction of the speed of light, and we can't really assume that it's as fast in this arc too. But even if we highball with that estimate, Sukuna's faster than that. His key attacks are fast, but at this point in the story no one overtly outspeeds Sukuna. So for most of early Dragon Ball, Sukuna's normal attacks are fine, and he obviously has the World Cleave and Divine Flame for stronger opponents. We'll get more into Divine Flame in a bit. He also vastly outspeeds a lot of people for a while. Roshi's really the only one who has the attack power to kill him, but I don't think he'd be much of a challenge. A domain plus a world dismantle can easily kill Roshi, and this isn't to underestimate Roshi. He's a genius martial artist, of course, but you also have to remember, Sukuna's a genius fighter too. But still, as for the early arcs of Dragon Ball, I really solo Sukuna. That's obvious, she's OP, so let's ignore her. Technically, he'd hard stop here, but we'll keep going. Devilman might be able to actually kill Sukuna. I say might for a few reasons. For one, Sukuna outspeeds him. Yes, his Devil May beam is awesome, but there's no point if he could just dodge it. It's even been stated before that later Dragon Ball villains could probably just dodge the attack, they're fast enough. It would kill them, but only if it makes contact. Plus, Sukuna can redirect damage from his attacks to Megumi. There's a chance that if he somehow were hit by this, he could redirect the damage to Megumi, if it's something that attacks the soul. Considering it bypasses durability, it probably is similar to that. Either way, the attack probably wouldn't even hit him in the first place. Now for a brief tangent about Divine Flame. While working on my Kid Goku vs JJK video, I came to see that Dragon Ball characters didn't have crazy heat resistance, until much later on in the story at least. This will be important, considering Sukuna's Divine Flame is incredibly hot. In that video, I determined Jogo can generate temperatures beyond 2500 degrees Fahrenheit and survive in that, with no struggle. Yet, Sukuna's arrow burnt him into nothing. Until Super, no one really displays feats to this level. The closest we get is Goku surviving a jet point blank. And in the anime there are some things, but again, we're using the manga here. Someone might bring up Namek exploding, but in the manga, there's not a bunch of lava everywhere. Like, Bulma was even on the planet at this time too, at least for a little bit, and she made it out fine. So you can't really say Namek was that hot. But yeah, there's not really any heat resistance feats. So it's really worth considering because Divine Flame might be a great trump card here. Like, obviously the World Dismantle is really strong, but I feel like a lot of people overlook Divine Flame. With heat that intense, it probably can kill here. Granted, we are working under an assumption that no one can resist heat to this level, and that the heat is actually that intense. In my Goku vs JJK video, I put more info about that attack. But in short, I came to the conclusion that it's at least 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, likely much hotter. We're sticking with that, and it's also worth considering how strong that attack is. So going forward, there are two very important things to keep in mind. 1. We're assuming the World Dismantle truly does ignore durability because it splits space open. This actually does seem to be the case here. Not a huge assumption. 2. We're going under the assumption that no one can handle the heat of the Divine Flame. Less likely than the first assumption, but still, decently likely. You might think it's crazy to say that because of how strong these characters are, but remember, these characters have died from viruses or just from the vacuum of space in general. They're not completely invincible just because they're strong. The big issue with World Dismantle is the requirements for Sukuna to activate it. He can't just fire it off whenever he wants. He needs to direct it as well as doing chants and hand signs. The Sukuna we're using does have the Binding Vow that requires this. By the 22nd World Tournament, characters are far stronger. Tien, Goku, and Roshi are moon level. Thing is, Sukuna still does outspeed everybody. A World Dismantle could kill them, and he doesn't need the domain's hit to do it. His regular speed is enough. These characters likely can't survive a Divine Flame either. Not to mention, his Cursed Tool can use electricity. Real electricity confirmed in his fight with Kashimo. The Thundershock surprise wasn't real electricity. Goku has actually tanked electricity before, but on this level with this potency, it might actually do something. We can't know for sure though, but worth mentioning. The same stuff applies to the King Piccolo arc. It's right after the 22nd World Tournament and characters get stronger, but it's relatively similar, especially for everyone besides Goku and Piccolo. But that brings up another question. What about the Mafuba? I think it's similar to the Devilman situation. A Mafuba can trap Sukuna, but I think his speed would help him here. Especially with him bloodlusted, I think he could whip out hand signs, chants, and a dismantle before Roshi could even set up the Mafuba, or Tien for that matter. If we're assuming everyone's going for the victory immediately, then yeah, I could see that being the case. Or even better, Sukuna could just destroy the container. After this arc, characters do grow more, but not excessively as far as we can see. For the 23rd World Tournament, they definitely are stronger, but my point is, it's the same result as the past arcs. You might think regen from either of the Piccolos could help, but it takes a lot out of him, and I'd assume the same goes for King Piccolo. Plus, if Sukuna goes for the head, he could win. Piccolo has stated before that his regen only works when his head is intact. Plus, the heat resistance thing still applies here. Characters are still only relativistic here as well, so using the faster than light highball, Sukuna can keep up. However, Maki has shown that you can dodge it if you know it's coming, which is pretty obvious if you know what to look for. You don't need to actually be faster than it. That obviously does help a lot, but still. I would think by this point in the story, if not earlier, characters could at least try to dodge it. But like I said, since Sukuna still does have some path to victory here, we're going to keep moving him on. At this point he is facing a lot of challenge though, but we will keep going until there's a hard stop. For what it's worth, this point in the story is where Sukuna is going to have a real tough time. He'll have to rely on his domain, Divine Flame, and World Dismantle. And in terms of the domain, he's shown before that he could actually alter the sure hit effect of it, with Binding Vows at least. Hypothetically, if the World Dismantle truly is all he has that can damage others, why not alter Malevolent Shrine to have the sure hit effect apply to that attack? Or even Divine Flame? At least for the former, his domain already does use Dismantle by default for inanimate objects. I definitely think this is a possibility, even if it means using another Binding Vow. And we know Sukuna loves spamming Binding Vows. And now that we enter the Z portion, from this point on, he really would have to rely on that, if it's even possible. He also has one more thing we'll get to later, but here is where I'd say most people can low diff him, but he still does have a chance, so we're going to keep going. Once the Saiyan Saga rolls around, this is where he has problems with speed. Especially by the latter parts of the saga, he will be completely outmatched in every stat. But like I said, we're still going until he has a hard stop. Sukuna has a small chance at least. Realistically, I would think he completely loses most fights here, but a World Dismantle or a Divine Flame can kill, assuming he applies the sure hit effect and they don't decide to move out of the domain right away, which they might not. But then again, we're using a hypothetical and like 4 assumptions altogether. We're using the hypothetical that he can alter his domain to do this. We're assuming that whatever he does to alter his domain doesn't require a severe Binding Vow. We're assuming the World Dismantle and Divine Flame can actually affect these people at this point, and we're assuming they won't just decide to move away from the evil Demon Slashy shrine right in front of them. If Sukuna's attacks can't hit here, there's no point. So, huge disclaimer. From the Saiyan Saga onwards, and for the next leg of this gauntlet that we're going to be looking at, we're solely looking at if there's anyone who could truly shrug off anything he does. From this point on, it's sort of Glaze. Even if all the assumptions and hypotheticals from before are true, if we stretch him to his absolute limit, is there a point where he objectively, no questions asked, even with the hypotheticals, cannot do anything? The serious scaling ends here, and the stupid glazing begins in its place. If you want to skip this part, go to here in the video. This section is more for fun. So by this point, the chances of him winning are actually stupidly low. It would require a lot of conveniences, but he's the king of conveniences. Ah yes, my ancient gauntlet victory technique I haven't used since the Heian era. But for real, I think he would truly stop by this point without bending the fight to work exactly in his favor. So with the disclaimer out of the way, let's warp everything in his favor. This part will be more abridged. Once we get to Namek, it's the same exact story, but with everyone being even stronger and faster. Guldo's time stop will be really helpful because even if he's caught in the domain, with a sure hit effect on the World Dismantle, nothing will happen to him. As for Frieza, he's highly durable, so if we're assuming the World Dismantle can't actually affect him, which it would if it ignores durability, then a well-placed World Dismantle cutting him down the middle could be a kill shot. Divine Flame probably wouldn't cut it, no pun intended. This is how Trunks cut him in half. But even then, it would still be really tough because, as we've seen, Frieza's actually capable of living while he's chunks of meat, like when he was revived. The chances of victory are so incredibly slim here, but there is a small chance. Based on the rules of this specific gauntlet, he's going forward. Let's say Sukuna can make the World Dismantle a sure hit, and Frieza's instantly caught in the domain's range, and for some stupid reason he doesn't decide to move immediately, and also doesn't attack Sukuna immediately, giving him time for the chance and the hand signs. And then a World Dismantle cuts his brain right down the middle, or simply decapitates him. Although if it decapitates him, his head would probably still survive and fly around and can even shoot Ki Blast. It's like those memes where people say Goku with no limbs versus Luffy or whatever. But if Sukuna simply cuts his brain off, like cuts the point of his head where his brain just connects to everything else, then it's just a brain with no body. Not a Kenjaku brain that can move on its own, but a normal racist space lizard brain. So even if the chances are like 0.00001%, that minuscule chance means there's still a chance. But even with all the glazing we're doing, he definitely stopped by the Cell Saga. Specifically, Cell. He'd be a hard stop. As in, Sukuna has no chance here. Even if we glaze him to the absolute limits, there's nothing he could do. Obviously, many people by this point probably can and would win, but this is the point where he has absolutely no chance of winning. This is the hard stop. Like before, we said his World Dismantle can cut through everyone, and his Divine Flame could probably affect others too. But this is useless against Cell. Unlike Piccolo or Frieza, a headshot won't be enough. Cell could regenerate from a single cell. That's if he even gets hit in the first place. I don't think a Divine Flame would burn him fast enough either. Especially with the fact that we've seen him survive in outer space. He could survive extreme cold and likely extreme heat too. Retroactively, we could apply this to Frieza as well, but nothing works for him here. So this is the hard stop. Even with the glaze, this gauntlet ends. But here's some food for thought. Sukuna doesn't stop here. There's a way that he could actually wash the entire verse that's more realistic than anything I put in the glazing section. Now we get more into fanfiction territory though. This is like one of those Dragon Ball what-ifs almost. So for this section, we're gonna get someone who actually has experience with that. Please introduce my good friend Salad Sane. It's just me, guys. Sukuna could probably take over someone, and theoretically just hop through bodies. Especially if he starts in early Dragon Ball, this is really easy for him. He outspeeds so many people here and could get a better body in the process. Plus, it would give him all of their key abilities and everything else. If he's up against someone later on, sure, that's an issue. But if we go back to the earlier parts of the gauntlet, like, what if he does this to someone in late Dragon Ball or early Z? Piccolo's probably not a great idea because Kami could take one for the team and then when he dies, Sukuna dies. Which would take both the body and the soul away with him. I'm sure Goku would at least work as a vessel. During the King Piccolo arc, he actually did resist deadly poison. Korin states he can only survive the Ultra Divine Water if he has supernatural stamina, spirit, and willpower, and that is a toxin. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Goku from the 22nd World Tournament can survive this, because it sounds like Sukuna's finger functions similarly. And this is if we assume it's a literal toxin. It might just be a figurative toxin because of the cursed energy, in which case a ton of characters in this verse can withstand it. By the way, that King of Lethal Poisons thing is a mistranslation. Special grade cursed objects are usually regarded as toxins in the first place, so this isn't exclusive to Sukuna. Sukuna's finger likely is a literal poison, but it's just worth mentioning this alternate interpretation. A more accurate translation is saying that Yuji harbors Sukuna within him, who is considered lethal poison. Plus, to ensure that they don't cage him, in Chapter 213 of JJK, Sukuna says breaking their soul and willpower could help. Besides withstanding his actual poison, this will ensure he has certain control. Many other characters have poison resistance too. Gohan even resisted severe and extreme doses of poisoning later in Super, at least in the anime. Boo was immune to poisons obviously as well. Of course, frost poisoning has an effect on strong people too, like Goku and Piccolo, but in the manga version it's implied to be a lethal dose of poison, with both Goku and Piccolo surviving it. In the anime, Frost has 2 separate doses. Of course, neither of these are part of the original manga, but still, we're kinda short on poison feats. This ability is probably his best one because if he's in the gauntlet and starts losing, why not hop to a new body? He could pull a Ginyu and just keep doing this, and he could just keep trading up. So what if he never stops? He keeps stealing stronger bodies. Oh god. Sukuna Ultra Instinct Goku, Sukuna Beast Gohan, Sukuna Black Frieza, Beerus, Zeno, the most terrifying Sukuna Arale. Actually, she'd probably find a way to win there. Shit, I shouldn't have ignored her before. So, by my own Gauntlet's rules, there is a chance he doesn't stop. As tiny as the chance is, if he goes in knowing exactly what to do, Sukuna can solo Dragon Ball by constantly trading up, assuming he can actually find people that resist him, and people that won't cage him either. But yeah, in all seriousness, in a realistic Gauntlet, he can get mid-diff by the 22nd World Tournament. By the Saiyan Saga, he gets very low diffed, and after that he pretty much has no chance to win, and he hard stops at Cell, which is actually pretty incredible. But let me know what you think below. Do you think I stopped him too early? Did I stop him too late? Did I not glaze him enough in the glazing section? Leave your thoughts below, and as usual, be civil. I know how power scaling comments can look. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.